Karen auctioned off my daughter like she was a limited edition pet. The opening bid? $5,000. Karen called her obedient, silent, pre-trained. That word, pre-trained, snapped something in me. I didn't just crash their auction, I obliterated it. I drove a truck through their fantasy, slammed Karen's face into the same steel table she used to price my child, and kicked her teeth out one by one, until the only thing she could chew was the blood-soaked contract she signed to make it all legal. The crowd paid $5,000 to see obedience. They got vengeance for free. They used to call Karen president. But when I walked out, they called her broken doll. They say you always remember the exact moment your life rips in half. For me, it was the sight of a pink headband, torn, crumpled, and spotted with blood, lying on the concrete path behind our porch swing. Mia's headband. My daughter's. She had just been out there, 8 years old. Sketchbook in one hand, a juice box in the other. She'd said, "I'm gonna draw the birds, Dad," and skipped outside like it was just another peaceful evening. It wasn't. I had stepped inside to warm up dinner. 3, maybe 4 minutes. That's all it took. When I came back, she was gone. No scream, no rustle of leaves, just silence. And that headband. I stood frozen for a second too long, mind refusing to accept what my gut already screamed. She didn't wander off. Someone took her. My fists clenched. I scanned the path, the sidewalk, the neighbors' yards. No tire marks, no witnesses. Just a thin line of faint drag marks on the pavement. Tiny shoe prints, barely noticeable, like someone had lifted her and dragged her feet as they moved. Then I saw it. A small scratch on the curb, fresh, with a flake of silver paint. A bumper. HOA-issued vehicle. They always use those dull gray sedans. Karen drives one. I didn't call the police. I didn't yell her name. I didn't even cry. Not yet. I walked into the garage, opened the drawer I hadn't touched in 5 years. Inside was my chipped combat knife, my old GoPro body cam, a roll of duct tape, and a set of keys with blood-stained knuckles in the memory. I strapped the camera to my chest, pulled on the gloves, checked the battery. Full. And I whispered to the empty air, "You made the worst mistake of your life tonight." Because this wasn't a search, this wasn't a rescue, this was retaliation. And someone in this rotten HOA, was going to learn exactly what a father becomes when you take his child. The HOA doesn't advertise their secrets. They bury them, behind bylaws, fake maintenance notices, and words like community enrichment. But I knew where to look. Karen had once bragged during a town hall about a multi-use storage facility the HOA acquired on temporary lease. Said it was off-limits due to asbestos concerns. Said it was unsafe. That was 2 months ago. Now the gates were open, and light leaked from inside like a wound. I parked 2 blocks down, killed the headlights, and approached on foot. My boots crunched against gravel. My pulse roared in my ears. The warehouse sat like a decaying lung, all rusted siding and fake neutrality. But as I crept closer, I heard it. Applause. Laughter. A woman's voice through a speaker. Smooth, poisonous, familiar. Next item up tonight. Lot 14. Obedient, silent, already trained. A perfect fit for our standards. That voice made my skin crawl. Karen. I slipped through a side door and entered darkness, except for the center stage. A square platform ringed by string lights and surrounded by folding chairs. And there she was, Mia. Caged in a plexiglass box like some exotic pet. Eyes wide with terror, arms bound at the wrists by satin ribbon. Like this was some twisted presentation, not a kidnapping. And next to her, glowing under stage light, was Karen Whitmore. In a navy cocktail dress, with pearls around her throat like a joke, and a clipboard in hand. She smiled like a celebrity host, like she was proud. "You'll notice her quiet disposition," she purred. "She hasn't made a single sound since arriving. Not even a scream. That's discipline." The crowd chuckled. I bit down on rage like a blade. And then I saw it. Displayed proudly in front of the cage. A certificate. Framed. Signed by Karen herself. Community property transfer. Name: Mia Davenport. Status: non-returnable asset. Authorized by HOA President. My fist curled so tight I felt my nails cut into my glove. Karen turned toward the audience again, hand on hip, voice sugary sweet. Opening bid is $5,000. Remember? This one's already broken in. I nearly stepped forward, nearly charged right then. But I stopped myself. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to know it was me. And I wanted to watch that smug face melt when it all came crashing down. So I stepped back into the shadows, pressed record on my camera, and whispered, "Sell her now, Karen. Smile while you can." She printed my daughter's name on a certificate and called her property. If you're still watching and ready to see what I did next, comment a 3 so I know you're with me. Trust me, it only gets darker from here. Karen raised her glass like a toastmaster in hell. "Shall we begin bidding at 5,000? She said, her voice a silk noose. After all, where else can you buy silence, obedience, and innocence? The audience clapped. I clenched the remote starter in my hand. 10 minutes were over. No more shadows. No more waiting. I pressed the button. The warehouse shuddered as my truck's engine roared to life outside. Every head turned toward the main door. I jammed the gear and let the beast go. Crash! The double doors tore from their hinges like paper. My black F-150 barreled in, metal screaming against concrete. Folding chairs scattered, screams erupted. The spotlight flickered. Someone dropped a wine glass. And Karen froze. That smug, powdered face paled. She dropped the clipboard. Her champagne flute shattered at her feet. I stepped out, boots crunching glass, bathed in red taillight glow. Everyone stared. Not one of them moved, except Karen. She took one trembling step back and hissed, "Security, get him out of—" Too late. One guard lunged. I met him with a straight punch to the throat. He dropped like a sack of wet meat. Another charged from the left. I grabbed a metal folding chair and slammed it over his head. The crack echoed like a rifle shot. Karen stumbled backward onto the stage, heels clicking madly, arms flailing for balance. "You're insane!" she shouted. "You'll go to prison for this!" I climbed the stage steps slow and steady. "You want obedience?" I growled. "Then get on your knees and beg for it." She reached for her phone, too slow. I kicked it from her hand. It skidded across the floor, bounced once, and shattered against the base of Mia's cage. The crowd backed away, some running, others frozen, paralyzed by guilt or cowardice. "You don't understand," Karen stammered. "This is a sanctioned event. This is legal," I roared, loud enough to shake the glass behind her. "You forged a contract to own my daughter. You painted her like property, and you laughed about it?" She opened her mouth again, but no words came. Only fear. I turned to the cage. Mia stared, eyes wide but unbroken. "Close your eyes, sweetheart," I whispered. "This part's not for you." Then I turned back to Karen. "This is what happens when you put a price tag on a child." I reached for the latch of Mia's cage and ripped it open with both hands. The sound of plexiglass snapping filled the room like thunder. And for the first time that night, Karen Whitmore finally shut up. The moment my hands tore open Mia's cage, the illusion shattered. Up close, I could see her face, filthy, tear-streaked, cheeks flushed from fear. Her wrists were bound in silk ribbon like a present no one asked for. Her eyes, though, never broke. They locked on mine like lifelines. "I've got you," I breathed. "Nobody's ever caging you again." Karen staggered behind me, muttering something about regret and consequences. I didn't hear her. I was focused on the tape over Mia's mouth, ripping it off in one pull. She winced, but didn't cry. "Can you stand?" I asked. She nodded, shaky, brave, braver than anyone in that room. I lifted her gently, holding her against my chest. She buried her face into my jacket. Her small hands clung to me like she'd never let go. And then I turned back, to Karen. She was halfway down the stairs, limping in heels, one hand still clutching the corner of her ripped dress, muttering like a priestess who'd just lost her altar. "You're ruining everything," she snapped, venom rising again. "You don't know what you're doing. This was for the betterment of the community." I stepped off the stage, holding my daughter. "You locked a child in a cage. You printed her name on a certificate like she was livestock. And now you want to talk about community?" Karen shrank back like I'd slapped her. I turned to the crowd. All those well-dressed monsters who had come here to bid. "Every one of you is guilty. But she," I pointed to Karen, "was your auctioneer." Gasps, phones lowering, shame setting in. And Karen? She just stood there, lip trembling, eyes narrowing, desperate to find a single word that would make this go back to the way it was. But there was no going back, not after tonight. I placed Mia gently inside the truck, locked the doors, and whispered, "Stay down. Don't move until I come back." She nodded. Not a sound, not a question. Just trust. I turned and walked back through the blown-open doorway like I owned the building. Karen was still there, frozen halfway between arrogance and collapse. Her mascara had started to run. The sweat on her temples smudged her perfect foundation. She didn't look like a leader anymore. She looked like a spoiled queen watching her kingdom burn. "You're done," I said, voice flat. She straightened her shoulders, tried to recover. "You broke into HOA property. You attacked people. You kidnapped—" I lunged forward, grabbed her by the collar, and spun her around like a rag doll. "Kidnapped," I growled into her ear. "You tried to sell my daughter, you rabid freak. You signed a certificate saying she was property, non-returnable. I should feed you that paper one syllable at a time." She clawed at my wrist, kicking in heels like a deranged peacock. "Let go of me! I'm HOA president!" "You were." I dragged her screaming across the stage, past shattered wine glasses and overturned chairs. The locket on her neck snapped free and hit the floor like a bullet casing. I threw her against the side of the now empty plexiglass cage, the same one Mia had been locked in. "Get in." "You wouldn't." I didn't wait. I shoved her inside, kicked the door shut, and latched it with a crack that echoed off the walls. Karen flailed, palms slapping the inside of the cage. "This is illegal! You're insane! I'll have your house condemned!" I grabbed the nearest bucket. Red, thick, industrial paint left near the wall by a careless maintenance crew. I yanked it open and hurled it over the top of the cage. The contents splashed across her hair, her face, her eyes, her teeth. She gasped, choking on it, coughing red streams down her chest. "You liked red so much on the flyers," I said. "Wear it." She shrieked and slipped inside the slippery cage, falling to her knees, drenched, humiliated, gasping like a fish in blood. I wasn't done. I pulled a sticker from my jacket pocket, the one they had posted next to Mia's cage. I had rewritten it. Lot 0, defective product, unsalvageable. Price, $0. I peeled the back, leaned in, and slapped it across Karen's forehead. Now the label fits. She screamed, but no one came. The crowd didn't rush forward. They didn't clap. They didn't protest. They watched, silent, shamed. Some filmed. Most just backed away, not out of respect, but out of fear that they might be next. Karen pounded on the cage, red paint dripping from her arms like blood from a butchered queen. "You'll regret this. You can't do this to me. I'm the president." I walked away. "You were the president," I said without turning. "Now you're just Exhibit A." And for the first time since I stepped into that building, I smiled. Karen was still clawing at the glass, dripping in red, when I turned back toward her. "You thought this was power, didn't you?" I said, voice low and heavy. "Selling children, printing certificates like you're God." She wheezed, red paint streaking down her face like melting makeup. "You assaulted me," she hissed. "This is assault. This is illegal." I grabbed the side of the cage and ripped the latch open again. The door slammed against the wall. Karen flinched. I reached in, grabbed her by the soaked collar, and yanked her forward like pulling rotten meat from a fridge. She screamed as I dragged her to the auction table. the same polished steel surface where she'd propped up my daughter's price tag. "You want a price? Let me show you what yours costs." I slammed her chest down onto the table. The sound echoed. Face down, mouth open. "No! No!" I slammed her head forward, shoving her chin against the sharp metal edge until her lips touched cold steel. She squirmed, but I locked her in place with one hand on her neck. "Bite it. Go ahead. Like you made her bite fear." "You're insane," she spat, mouth half pressed against the edge. "This is barbaric." So was caging a child. Her eyes darted, searching for help. No one moved. The room was silent, except for her frantic gasps and the creak of the metal table. I stepped back just enough to let her raise her head slightly, and then I raised my boot. "Final offer." She shook her head violently. Too slow. I kicked the side of her jaw, hard, fast, precise. Crack! Her head slammed sideways into the edge. Her scream was muffled by blood. 2 teeth flew. One clattered across the table. The other hit the concrete and skidded into the shadows. Karen dropped to the floor, writhing, clutching her face, moaning through shattered teeth and split lips. I knelt beside her. "That's the sound of justice, Karen. That's the sound you silenced in my daughter." She tried to speak. Only gargled sobs came out. I reached into my coat and pulled out the framed certificate of ownership she had proudly displayed just 15 minutes earlier. "You signed this, remember?" I held it up for the cameras, for the crowd. Then I ripped the glass from the frame, pulled out the page, folded it into a jagged square, and shoved it into her bloody mouth. "Eat your legacy," she gagged, spitting ink and blood onto her blouse. I stood tall, addressed the room. "You wanted a show? You got one. You wanted silence? Record this." Then I turned to the guard, still conscious, still frozen near the wall. "Tell the cops I'm done here, and tell them to bring an ambulance. For her, not for me." As I walked away, Karen sobbed behind me on the floor, spitting out the last lie she ever signed. Karen lay curled on the cold floor, coughing blood onto her pearl necklace. Her mouth twitched. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for someone, anyone, who'd still defend her. No one moved. Not one hand reached for her. Even the so-called board members backed away, like rats abandoning their self-appointed queen. I stepped over her, calm and deliberate. "You always hid behind paper," I said, voice low but sharp. "Violation slips, fines, eviction threats, bylaws, but this—" I pulled the certificate of ownership from the ground where she'd spit it. It was crumpled, smeared with her blood, still readable. "This is the paper that ends you." I held it up to the nearest phone camera still recording. Her signature gleamed under the warehouse lights, sharp, proud, legally damning. Name, Mia Davenport. Status, non-returnable asset. Signed by Karen Whitmore, president of HOA. I turned and locked eyes with the stunned onlookers. That's not hearsay. That's not opinion. That's not a rumor on Nextdoor. That's a signed admission. You all saw her run this auction. You all heard her call my daughter obedient. And now you'll all witness what justice tastes like. Karen let out a gurgled sound. One hand reached weakly for my ankle. I kicked it away without looking down. "Don't reach for me. You reached for children. Now reach for a lawyer." Her mascara was smeared down to her jaw. She looked like a clown dragged through a war zone. I placed the bloodied certificate on her chest. "Keep it. They'll need it when they process you." Then I turned my back on her for the last time, because the truth was on paper, and Karen Whitmore had signed her own damn verdict. I left Karen on the floor, trembling and choking on her own ego. Her designer heels had snapped. Her once pristine blazer clung to her body in streaks of red, sweat, and spit. She wasn't just beaten, she was exposed, stripped of every title she'd weaponized against this neighborhood. Still, not a soul in the room moved to help her. "You see her now, don't you?" I barked, turning to the crowd. "That's not a leader. That's not a community pillar. That's the monster you gave power to, because you were too scared to tell her no." Silence. Some people lowered their eyes, Others quietly put their phones away. A few started edging toward the exits, shame tripping over their polished shoes. You let her patrol your lawns, count your flags, fine your children for sidewalk chalk, and you smiled because she scared you more than she served you. I pointed at the auction table, still smeared with blood and the twisted remains of a fake certificate. You want HOA authority? There it is. That's what it costs when you stop questioning and start complying. A man in a gray suit finally spoke up, voice shaking. We didn't know. We didn't sign anything. I marched toward him. No? But you stayed. You sat. You watched a little girl locked in a cage and said nothing. You raised wine glasses instead of your voices. That makes you complicit. He looked down, throat tight. Couldn't speak again. I scanned the room. No one met my eyes. Except one woman near the back, middle-aged, trembling. She whispered, "Will she live?" I glanced at Karen, coughing and cradling her mouth like shattered glass. "Yeah," I said coldly. "But she won't forget how it feels to be helpless. Just like Mia won't forget what it felt like in that cage." The woman nodded, tearful. And then, quietly, she took out her phone and started live streaming. Others followed, one by one. Phones lifted, cameras turned. Not at me. Not anymore. They pointed at Karen, at the monster in pearls and paint. Karen looked up, dazed. Her eyes flicked to the cameras, and for the first time fear twisted her face into something real. "Stop. Stop filming me," she croaked. "You don't have the right. You gave up your rights when you printed a price tag for a child," I snapped. She tried to stand, collapsed halfway. I stood still and let the silence take shape. Not the kind Karen once forced with rulebooks, but a new silence. One born of reckoning. Because silence can be imposed. But this silence was earned. And she felt it. Every second. No fake apology. No press release. No HOA lawyer can undo this, I said. You branded my family. Now I brand your legacy. I turned, one final time, to the crowd. You all knew how to follow rules. Now it's time you learn how to follow truth. Then I walked out. Outside, the night air hit like absolution. Mia was still curled in the passenger seat, safe, eyes watching the door. When I opened it, she reached out wordlessly, and I pulled her in. I drove away from that warehouse without sirens, without spotlights. But behind us, the footage spread like fire. And the silence Karen once ruled with? That silence was gone. Forever. They booked her under her full name, Karen Elizabeth Whitmore. It took 3 hours for the cops to arrive at the warehouse that night. I didn't stick around to see it. I didn't have to. The footage had already gone viral. Uploaded by half a dozen people inside, blasted across every HOA watchdog forum, and shared under one haunting caption: HOA auctioned a child. Father delivered justice. The media storm hit like a hurricane. By morning, Karen's pristine face was on every screen, her blood-stained dress cropped and zoomed with ruthless precision. They played the part where she screamed, "I'm the president," over and over. They played it until it became a meme. By noon, the mayor issued a public apology. By nightfall, the state attorney general had opened a full-blown investigation. But what mattered more than any headline was the footage I gave directly to the FBI, the unedited version from my body cam. It didn't just show what happened inside that warehouse. It showed the paperwork, the names, the signatures. It showed everything. Karen was arrested without bail. She wore an orange jumpsuit and a face wrapped in gauze. Her jaw had been wired shut. Every time she blinked into the cameras, she looked less like a villain and more like what she truly was, a fraud with broken teeth and no more hiding places. She tried to blame it on her overzealous board, on an experimental community event gone wrong, on digital manipulation. She even claimed I had staged the whole thing for revenge. But paper doesn't lie, and neither did the signature. The trial came 6 weeks later. I sat in the gallery, Mia beside me, holding my hand. She was calm, stoic, but her grip never loosened. The prosecutor read the charges like scripture. Kidnapping, child endangerment, abuse of power under color of law, attempted trafficking of a minor, conspiracy to commit fraud, aggravated psychological torture. Each word hit the courtroom like a nail sealing a coffin. Karen didn't speak, couldn't. She sat behind the defense table, face sunken, lips stitched with surgical tape, eyes hollow. But when they showed the footage, of her voice calling Mia obedient, of her smiling beside a cage, of her holding a wine glass over a certificate titled non-returnable asset, the jury didn't flinch. They only looked at her the way a surgeon looks at a tumor, with cold, necessary detachment. Verdict? Guilty. On all counts. Sentence? 42 years in federal prison. No parole. But that's not what broke her. No. That came 3 days later, in holding, when a local paper ran the headline that would stick longer than any court document. Bupe Gaimat, Karen Whitmore, Vakizakwinlook. Broken Doll, the fall of an HOA queen. The inmates saw it. The guards passed it around. By the end of the week, the entire block had a new nickname for her. Broken Doll. They would whisper it when she limped past in silence. They would say it through the walls at night. They would sing it when she got her food tray, and no amount of gauze could muffle that shame. Mia recovered slowly. She doesn't draw cages anymore. She draws birds. She draws open fields. She laughs now. Not often, but when she does, it doesn't sound afraid. As for me, they never pressed charges. Public sentiment called it justified force. Privately, one detective shook my hand and said, "You finished what we were too slow to start." The HOA? Dissolved. Its bylaws shredded. Its board members subpoenaed. No one dared mention dues on our street again. And Karen? She sits in silence, behind bars, jaw wired. No mirrors, no pearls, just the sound of her own name, carved into her by everyone she once ruled. Broken Doll. And she will wear that title longer than any presidency she ever claimed. Forever. Justice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes crashing through a wall. Sometimes it screams instead of pleads. And sometimes it wears no badge, holds no title, and asks for no permission. What Karen did wasn't just illegal. It wasn't just cruel. It was inhuman. She didn't see a child. She saw a product. She didn't see a father. She saw an obstacle. And she didn't expect anyone to fight back, because that's what power does. It convinces you that no one will stand up. But I did. And not because I'm brave. Not because I'm some action hero. I stood up because I looked into my daughter's eyes, in that cage, and saw a world that had already decided she was worth less than silence. That was the last time anyone underestimated her. Karen's name won't be remembered on street signs or plaques. It'll echo in court transcripts and prison records, in hashtags and documentaries. But the real sentence wasn't the 42 years she got. It was what came after. The moment she realized no one feared her anymore. The moment she became a warning, not a woman. They call her Broken Doll now. Not because of what I did to her face, but because of what she did to herself. With every forged signature, every fake smile, every twisted rule written in fine print and sharpened into a weapon. So what's the lesson here? It's not just about HOA corruption, or bureaucratic abuse, or small-town power games. It's about how fast silence becomes complicity. How easy it is to look away when the rules don't hurt you. And how dangerous it is when no one questions the people enforcing them. I'm not asking you to break into buildings or swing punches, but I am asking you to look harder, speak louder, and never, ever let fear masquerade as leadership. Because sometimes the most dangerous villains aren't the ones who sneak through windows, but the ones who sit at the head of the neighborhood board, sipping wine and printing price tags. If this story moved you, if it made you angry or sick or even just think a little deeper, I want to hear from you. Comment below. What would you have done if it was your child behind that glass? And if you were there that night, would you have stood and watched, or stood and fought? It means more than you know. If this story hit hard, please give it a like. Subscribe for more stories that challenge the line between justice and revenge, between silence and truth. And don't forget to hit the bell, because the next one might go even deeper. Because this isn't just storytelling. This is a reminder. Silence protects no one. But truth will rip the cage apart. Every single time. Thank you for watching. Stay loud, stay human, and never forget the price of obedience when given to the wrong hands.